Hey, let's start the show.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
Welcome to another Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all so much for joining us for episode 119. And yes, 19 is one of my favorite numbers. I don't feel lucky because of it. It's a Dark Tower, Stephen King. It was a big reoccurring thing for Stephen King. Therefore, I become obsessed with it. All that fancy jazz. You know how it is.
Not really.
No? Okay. Well,
we had the Stephen King talk. We're gonna have to have that full on conversation one of these days. I just can never get into it. So
yeah.
maybe we'll have
Stephen
a
King.
convincing one Chris convincing the other Chris.
Yeah,
to
I even
Stephen
have
King.
a buddy that's as obsessed as I am with it. I could even have him come over, and we could have him and I could just berate you with Stephen King references and love, and it would be kind of amazing. But anyway, tonight we have a great lineup. We are going to do an interview with the Michigan Atheists about their upcoming convention that yours truly will be speaking at the beginning of April. We also are going to be talking about the tariffs. We can't help ourselves. We have to have that conversation about tariffs. So we're going to have that conversation about tariffs tonight. We're also going to do a segment, and it's not going to address whether ADHD is real or not, but somebody posted this article about how a very popular scientist essentially says ADHD is a bunch of BS and doesn't exist. And we wanted to get to the facts and get to talk not about the facts of whether ADHD is bullshit or not, but what can we do if a well-known scientist is fighting the mainstream data that shows certain statistical analyses are true or false. And what do you do then? A lot of people use people-specific names and they say, hey, well, look, this person's super intelligent, therefore we should just believe them. They're going to know more. And, this guy has spent a lot of time researching psychology in children. And it's kind of hard because it's like, what do you do? So we thought it would be a very entertaining conversation tonight to talk about, hey, what do you do in this situation, and how can we go about and continue to remain skeptical without just accepting some BS biases?
You're getting into the scientific method specifically. I think that's where we'll go with it.
We will. But before we get into that, we have a little bit of sad news.
Uh-oh.
I didn't know this, Anna, but there's been some stuff that's going on with Trump's internal team. They've made the news quite a bit over the last year and a half.
A little bit.
There's been a lot of casualties. Tons of casualties. As he would say it, nah, very, very many casualties.
Well, he said earlier, though, that everybody wants a job at the White House.
He did.
Like, they get...
They want it so bad, they're rotating out for their fellow Americans to step up. So we thought
it's called turnover.
It is. We thought we'd do an in memoriam to all of Trump's past team for the last year.
So we starting with the first?
First?
Or we start with the most recent?
We'll see how it goes. Gary Coleman, Director
Cone.
of National Economic Council and Chief Economic Advisor to the President. Started January 20th, 2017. Resigned March 6th, 2018. Tenure, 411 days.
the next one was Hope Hicks. She was communications director. That was the highest she got in there. And her resignation was announced on February 28th, 2018. She started January 20th, just one of the first dayers, like Gary Cohn. So she had it for 405 days. And I don't know if she's going to be sticking around in any other thing, but it says that she's just completely and utterly resigning.
Rob Porter, White House Staff Secretary. Started January 20th, 17. Resigned February 7th, 2018. Shouldn't we 384 days.
I think we should probably say that he's the heavyweight champion of the White House, Rob Porter, with all the black eyes that his wives had. That's what took him out. That's what took him out. But and then there's Omarosa, which what she did, which it says that she was the director of communications for the Office of the Public Liaison. She started January 20th. She's got connections with Trump from his reality TV days, but she was done December 13th of last year, and now she's on the Big Brother series again, back on reality TV. She was here 366 days.
Dina Powell, Deputy National Security Advisor. Started January 20th. Resigned December 8th. Or maybe it was January 12th. She really just couldn't figure it out. Tenure, 358 days.
And the high-flying Tom Price. He was the Secretary of Health and Human Services, February 10th, 2017 to September 29th, 2017. He only spent 232 days in his tenure, and he was kicked out for taking airplane trips on the government dime.
Wow. Sebastian Gorka, Deputy Assistant to the President. Started January 30th. Resigned August 25th. Tenure, 208 days.
Oh, man, I can't believe I get to do this one. Steve Bannon, Chief Strategist and Senior Counsel. He was in there from November 13th, so he was there part of the transition team, November 13th, 2016, and he officially started on the 20th of 2017. And then he was out August 18th, and we all know that he was in Italy last week, stirring up all kinds of trouble in the election out there, so the tendrils of Bannon reached far and wide. Anthony
Scaramucci. White House Communications Director. Hired July 21st, 17. Started July 26th. Fired July 31st. Longest tenure, 6 days.
The wildest 6 days ever.
That's true.
And Reince Priebus, he was White House Chief of Staff. He started the 13th, he part of the transition team. And he officially started on the 20th of 2017 of January. And he quit or was fired July 28th, 2017, 190 days out. He was the RNC president or leader or whatever, so chairperson. So I don't know if he's back into the RNC or not, but he was just kicked out because he just couldn't get along with Trump, as far as we know.
Sean Spicer, White House Press Secretary. Hired November 13th. Oh, I'm sorry. Hired December 22nd. Resigned July 21st. Tenure 183 days.
Second best SNL character last year.
That's true.
Melissa McCarthy, I think was her name, that did that. Like the Trebek
thing was
or
best.
no, the Trump Alec Baldwin was the best, but the Sean Spicer one was pretty good too. Mike Dubke was the next one. It says White House Communications Director, hired March 6, 2017. He resigned May 18, 2017. 74 days into his tenure. He was in there so short, I didn't even know who he was. So, I got nothing.
James Comey, FBI Director, local X-Files resident. Hired June 21st.
He wants to believe.
13. Fired May 9th, 2017. 1,344 days his tenure. Didn't last more than 4 months under Trump.
No, he was supposed to be a 10-year appointment in the FBI director position. But as far as I know, he's all over the place. He's going to be interviewed by, I think he's going to be interviewed by Stephen Colbert or something. There's a big interview coming out with him soon. So, anyways, next one is Mike Flynn. Role in the Trump administration was National Security Advisor. He was hired November 18, 2016. He started, obviously, on the first day, January 20th, 2017. He was fired February 13th when all of his Russia connections came out, 25 days into his tenure, and he's going to jail. He's the only one He's the only one fighting Mueller so far. He refuses to fold. Everyone around him has turned in their belt, and so he's going. Or no, him and Manafort, Flynn and Manafort are going to jail.
Sally Yates, Acting Attorney General, promoted January 20th, fired January 30th. Second shortest tenure, 11 days.
Yep. She was the best. She refused to do the travel ban and some other stuff. Like, she just stood up and she was like, nope, I'm not going to do that. You're going to fire me. I ain't doing that. It was awesome. Like, she's all about civil rights. You got other notable departures in here? Are we going to go through these goofy people, or is it just going to be like let's just do the names and what they did?
Josh Raphael, Deputy Communities Director.
Rick Dearborn, Deputy Chief of Staff.
George Sifikis, Director of Office of Public Liaison.
Ezra Cohen, Watnick, Senior Director of Intelligence Programs, National Security Council.
Michael Short, Senior Press Assistant.
Walter Schaub, Director of the Government Office of Government Ethics. I don't know who any of these people are. So this is why there's no other notable departures, just other people.
Vivek Murphy, Surgeon General.
Angela Reed, Chief Usher, White House. Chief Usher? They actually count that?
Katie Walsh.
Like who
Deputy
like
Chief
walking
of
people
Staff.
through the aisles or something?
No. That's for the collection
And then,
plates.
here's one. Preet Bharara. He's U.S. Attorney General, Southern District of New York. He has one of the number one podcasts in podcasting right now because he basically says, like, he was promised by Trump that he would get to keep his job, and then he fired him from that job. So how many people is this total here?
25. 25
25 people
casualties that we know of. And there could be more. This is just with a little research. So that concludes
well, as far as I know, this is like the highest turnover presidency ever.
We don't know. We could do the research on it. I just thought it'd be fun to go through and talk about all the deaths that this presidency has caused. And it's in its wake. It's insane. That concludes our In Memoriam for 2018, Trump's first year in office. Join us next year.
Sad violin.
Join us next year for In Memoriam 2.0. Hopefully with a few less bodies. We're going to take a real quick commercial break here. And when we come back, we're going to be talking tariffs. We'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics.
This is Deborah McTaggart, the voice of Beatrice Johnson from Atheist Apocalypse Podcast, and you are listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
If you'd like to join the ranks of Patreons and sponsor the show, head over to patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics. For less than a 20-ounce soda or an energy drink each week, you can help sponsor us, the hosts, and our charity of choice. Patreon helps Cellar Door Skeptics create better content, become better activists, and it's going to help you stay healthier by drinking one less soda or one less energy drink each week. Click the link in the notes of the show to sponsor us today, because we bring the discussion with the sources.
Hey, my name is Wesley. I'm from the Atheist Nomads podcast. Kick back a while and listen to my friends on the Cellar Door Skeptics.
Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. That was a little depressing, Hannah. I'll be honest, that was more depressing than I kind of planned on. A little bit longer. I thought we'd just read through them real quick, be like, brush it off. But I kind of cried over the break.
It's a bit of a bummer.
Yeah. I can't believe there's that many people that
It's a
don't
bit
work.
of a bummer.
I just can't believe there's that many people. And maybe next week we'll come back with an actual statistical fact that says these are the amount of people that are more than any other presidency. We'll look at that. Tonight I didn't feel like, going into that much research for it. I thought it was funny because I've never seen that many people ever get fired. Like, you just never hear about it. It's like, you figure there are 52 weeks in a year. That's one every other week almost. Almost every other week we had a firing or somebody quit. That's crazy to me.
That's awesome.
My company doesn't even go through that many people.
Whenever I heard all the turnovers and stuff that were going on through the presidency, though, one of my thoughts was that, like, people that are like, I can't deal with this. Everything is so bad in here, and I disagree with everything. It's like, why are you leaving then? Like, I can't think of a place where you'd be able to do more damage and hold the system and fight for fight the good fight, is just to stay in the trenches and fight the whole time. But I guess these people just, like, they didn't want to fight that hard all day, every day, nonstop, I guess. I don't know. I was just thinking that if you really wanted to make a change and, like, fight against what you see as something being bad, you would want to stay there, like, in the middle of it and fight it instead of, like, leaving and then yelling at it from the outside. I think you'd be able to do more from the inside. But, like, Gary Cohn, he quit and he didn't really like the tariff stuff and he'd been fighting the whole time, so he's going to leave and now he's going to have no influence at all. Like, I don't see where the logic is there.
I don't either, but I mean, I guess neither one of us have had to work in that environment either. So, I mean, you got to think about it. It's kind of like a bad job.
Yeah,
if you're in a really bad job, what would you do? I mean, some of me says
like the worst job.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine working for Trump? I don't know. I guess some of me, I'm pretty imaginative person, but I can't even imagine that. Like that's beyond me.
All the people, like the major names that we just talked about, though, like their salaries are close to 3 figures a year. Like I could take looking at Trump's stupid face every day to get paid over $100,000 a year. I could look at his dumbass face and say, "Good morning, Mr. Trump," every single day for 4 years to get paid $100,000 a year. I could do that, and I could fight him all day long, every day. Whatever, let's do this. But I mean, people are going to be doing it right now. Like, we're going to be talking tariffs here in this next segment, and I know people are going to be fighting him every step of the way because of this. So, I mean, this is a really big thing. It's been developing. Obviously, this is a week after, or kind of like 3 or 4 days after the fact. But, it started off with the idea of being this broad brush of tariffs. So any steel or aluminum coming into the United States gets taxed on an extra whatever amount, just anybody. Like, nobody gets an exemption. All steel, America first. Nobody else gets any special treatment. And everybody freaked out about that. So, I mean, that's pretty much where it started for me. And I threw some links together here and some stuff for a few things beforehand. And then obviously the announcing on Thursday of Trump saying that he's actually going to be going through with this, with some exemptions and stuff to make it a little bit lighter. So I don't know. Pretty much what I was just curious with you is because like I know exactly where I am because I'm in the manufacturing thing. This is a terrible idea in my perspective for a broad brush. The more surgical thing, I can understand the logic for it, but is this something that you know about much in your history or your company really gives a crap about?
It does not affect my personal company per se, but it does affect us in retrospect because of the companies we support. A lot of companies we support use steel and things like that for manufacturing. And I don't know, because I'm a little torn because I do agree that, hey, how do we bring the industry back to America, right? How do we do certain things? But I'm on the opposite side. I'm saying, why do I want to produce steel? Why do I want all these? I don't want to do that. Like, that doesn't sound like, I mean, maybe it's profitable, but it doesn't sound very environmentally friendly. And when we look at our current administration, who are not environmentally friendly in any way, shape, or form, it kind of makes me a little scared. But we had a conversation actually that came up at work, ironically enough. My boss kind of brought this up. This was not me initiating this, but my boss brought this up, and I have a co-manager, and we started talking through it. And my boss won't tell me his political alignment, really at all. But I'm pretty sure he's middle of the road, is my guess. And my co-manager is definitely very right wing. I'm 100% open trumpet supporter. He likes to support trumpets, but he's definitely a Trump supporter.
This is the guy that always calls you out. He always tells you about the Trump thing this week or something.
No. That's just an employee. This is the co-manager that he doesn't do that. He knows we disagree politically, so he usually doesn't bring it up. He actually has been, is really good about that. But my boss brought it up in front of us, and my boss just kept looking at me because it's like, yeah, where's your opinion on this? It's like, yeah, like you should know my opinion. Like, I believe in a one world government in some aspects, and I believe in world trade, and I believe that we're so entrenched in this that I think it's an extremely bad idea to just start all of a sudden making these moves. And I'm a little skeptical of how he came up with 25%. It boggles my mind. And then, the counter side to that, having to listen to that co-manager is him saying, well, you understand this is going to bring industry back to America and all these other things. And, you look at these different things. And then he brought up, ironically enough, he brought up the solar industry, right? And he's like, well, we had that solar plant that tried to do all these things and look how much it failed and screwed employees over and all these things. I was like, well, yeah, these tariffs aren't going to help any of these companies. That's going to make all of that worse. And, oh, hey, by the way, you're right. We failed at making solar panels because we can't compete with China. You're 100% right on that.
Yeah.
But guess what? We manufactured the steel structures that held the things. We talked about this 2 weeks ago. But I can't say that because neither one of them listen to my podcast, and I don't want them to go like, don't go look it up because the last thing I need is for you to go look that up and then be like, oh yeah, well, look at that guy. He's a socialist and he's an anarchist. Yeah, he doesn't care if we burn the world down. I don't need that.
Yeah.
So on my side,
you said the word steel case a couple times on air too, and you're just like, ah.
Yeah, a couple times. You just said it, another time. But I don't feel this is the way to correct it personally. I feel this is an off the cuff decision, not thought out, not very well maneuvered. It's not something that makes friends with other nations. And I feel that maybe while it might not be a war starter, I feel that it's going to be somewhat of a trade embargo, and we're gonna I need to go get a new iPhone now before my iPhone cost goes up because all our phone costs are going to go up. All these other things, because people are going to be like, well, you're going to charge us this amount of money. We're going to do the same thing back. And I feel it's going to be a tit for tat without anybody sitting down and having cooperation worldwide.
I agree. The WTO, the World Trade Organization, should be the one doing this kind of stuff. The United States, with our presidency or whatever, it's just obviously President Bully Trump. This is how he has always done business. We always talk about what he was like as a private, I guess, real estate tycoon. The number of bankruptcies he had in real estate, I really have a hard time saying tycoon, but there were all kinds of people who had really big, lucrative contracts doing glass and major construction work on his facilities, and he would just bully them I want a better price. I don't care where it's coming from. Just do whatever and to get the best deal, bully and push and crush. Well, he's in charge at the helm of the world's largest economy, and he's just going to think he can bully it around. He doesn't understand or realize that the rest of the world, when collectivized, is larger than the United States. This is math and something that he's not very good at. So what he's talking about is doing 25% on steel and 10% on aluminum. I think you're right in that where he got those numbers, somebody probably pulled him out of it, a top hat for him that he keeps under his desk or something. But in the end,
it was like one of those things, where you get to choose your own number. They're like, all right, we're going to put 25, 15, 18, 32. We'll hope he gets to 32, and then he just sticks his hand in there and pulls it out. That's hilarious. Or a fortune cookie. Maybe they put them all in fortune cookies for him, like so that it encouraged him. He had to eat it, to get the thing out. And then he's like, oh, I really like this because it told me my fortune of what I should be screwing people over for.
All kinds of stuff. I mean, that's the thing with him. Like, though, you our least suspected, I guess, method is that he actually talked to an expert who knows a lot about world political, socioeconomic trends and said, this is a good place to start. Like, it's really not a thing because right at the start, he said everyone. And so many people came through and screamed and yelled and told him that this is an absolute horrible idea, that it's been changing. So essentially what he started off was just anybody who was coming in was going to be getting a tariff. Any steel, any aluminum, anywhere is going to be getting a tariff. And then a lot of people were asking right out of the gate, which is, how can the president just do this? Can the president just, unilaterally take off and do whatever he wants? Well, what they're doing is they're invoking a law from 1962. They cited Section 232, and we're going to link the Vox article that talks about the different laws that allow these types of things. And what they're doing is it's the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. It's a provision that gives the Secretary of Commerce the authority to investigate and determine the impacts of any import on the national security of the United States, and the president the power to adjust tariffs accordingly. What they're doing is invoking national security. If we don't have enough steel and aluminum, we can't build our military. And so they're saying that if we are being unfairly, I guess, flooded with cheap steel, that our military industry, if we went to war, would not be able to sustain itself to build our massive weapons of war. The military industrial complex would not be able to self-sustain. And that's what they're invoking, saying that is a national security threat. And they want to stop Chinese steel and I guess, countries that are flooding the market with cheap steel. That's the whole concept behind this. But
so I want to stop
when he came
right
out, he
for a
wanted
second,
to use
though, because so doesn't his companies use cheap Chinese steel? Isn't this going to hurt all his business deals? They do. He doesn't buy American steel. He buys Chinese steel.
Yeah, I know. There's been a couple of articles that have talked about him buying cheap imported Chinese steel. And, well, guess what? I guarantee you there'll be an exemption somewhere in this thing for the Trump organization to not have to pay any kind of extra fees, or they'll be able to have access to. You all know how these businesses. This is my opinion, obviously, that he will do whatever he can to enrich himself in his position. But yeah, this would force him to pay more money for steel if he wants to build things in the United States. So, I mean, this could potentially be something that hits him a little bit too.
Yeah. So anyway, you're saying they're invoking an old law, essentially, because they're worried about
50-year-old law
being able to produce weapons during the wartime. If we ever had to go to war,
don't
we have enough weapons?
That's
as it is?
Really.
We have enough mass shootings. There's obviously enough rifles around, so I don't know.
The weapons of war are a little bit different than what civilians can buy. Like, they're talking tanks and heavy artillery and ships and all the really heavy duty stuff. And so, I mean, the argument is sound that most of us would just say, how about we just not go to war? That's a better option. But I mean, this is the Republican Party here that's using these types of things to justify and it's a legal authority that's been given to the president. And we kind of have to deal with the law of the land at the moment. And so what we're looking at here is the president has legal authority to unilaterally do this, and he has chosen to do it. He got enough flack So we're one of the links from CNBC. All these different, I would say it's hard to say famous, but all of these top economists are essentially saying that the Trump regime, as some people like to say, that the Trump administration, this is a bad decision as far as economics is concerned. The political socioeconomic leading things that would tell you what to do in this situation. It doesn't say to go in and bully your way in, because they understand that the world is incredibly complex and trade wars can start. So a lot of economists came out of the gate right at the beginning and said throwing a 25% levy on all steel and 10% on aluminum, on all aluminum, going to really hurt the U.S. economy. And that was the initial position before any changes to allow exemptions. So Mexico and Canada, our two biggest steel and aluminum partners, they have been given exemption. We don't know if it's permanent, but they've been given exemption. Essentially, they're not allowed to prop up their steel and aluminum industries and flood our markets with cheap stuff. But I guess currently the way they're doing it is acceptable to the president.
I wonder how he made that decision. And it's kind of funny because
I have no idea.
when it was announced, the Dow dropped, I don't know, like 400 or 500 points. It closed lower.
It always
right?
does.
We've seen other steel industry users stocks drop. And they're talking about, because I don't think all Republicans are on board with this. How about this? I know they're not all on board with this. This is actually, it's kind of funny.
No, there's a bunch of them that wrote a letter.
Yeah, this is kind of a deviation from your libertarian Tea Party-ish Republicans and more of your actual conservatives. This is more of an actual conservative viewpoint rather than that, farther right-leaning viewpoint, right? And it's kind of interesting to see, in my opinion, this is an interesting thing to see, that we're now watching the Republican Party kind of divide itself a little bit, which is exciting for me a little bit because, the more it divides, the easier it is to conquer. But it's nice to see them arguing a little bit over internal politics because, in this case, I probably side closer with not wanting these tariffs than I do with anybody that wants to put a tariff in place, especially because maybe they've spent a whole year researching this. Maybe they have. Maybe we're being too ungranting. I don't know how to say it. Too mean to Trump. Maybe that's us because we don't like Cheeto Monster guy. But I just don't see the research that went into that. I mean, they're talking about hundreds of thousands of jobs that could be lost because of this. They could kill that part of our economy. And I just say, hey, did anybody, in my world, right?
A little bit.
Yeah. In my world, when we go to make those decisions, logically, if you're doing a good business practice, you sit down and you map out everything and you spiderweb it. You do all your, you got to do all your value streams. You got to see where your impacts are going to hit. What is going to be your critical factors, semi-critical factors. You look at all this and you map all of this out, and you spend a lot of time doing this to make a larger, point. Because, for example, if I wanted to all of a sudden cut dunnage out of this one value stream, to one of the Steelcase's clients and say, hey, you guys don't need this anymore. You guys need to figure out how to box it up. They're going to turn around and what does that do? They turn around and they bill Steelcase for a different cost. Then they're like, well, you were giving us stuff. We're now going to bill you for this. Their costs go up. Oh, by the way, we were providing extra transportation. We were working with you. Now we're not going to do that. We're just going to send this stuff directly to you. So there's so many ramifications to me making just one decision. I can't just make it by myself. I have to get a lot of people involved. And it feels like Trump's able to make these tariff decisions kind of on his own in some aspects.
Yeah. Well, just about his entire economic team said no. I mean, hell, Gary Cohn quit. He quit over this. He was one of the biggest driving forces in his tax bill. And so, I mean, we've got to basically, we've said that a bunch of Republicans, like a large number of Republicans, as far as I know, like 100 of them signed a letter to the president saying, don't do this. Or more specifically, don't do this to everyone. You can pick out a couple countries that you don't like the way their trade practices or whatever. And, that's kind of like a light-handed touch to it. But Let's talk about a real world scenario that's already happened. The Swedish company Electrolux, I don't know if you know who they are. They do refrigerators and all kinds of housing appliances and stuff. Well, they had a $250 million investment in Tennessee that was planned, and they delayed it. And this was on March 2nd. So this is a couple of days before. And so we don't know their final what they're going to be doing, if they're going to be just completely, totally pulling that system out. But this is what happens. So like, this is a global company, right? This is a global corporation, and they hear that this one country that they're in, that they manufacture some things in, is now going to start saying you can't bring that cheap steel here. So what does that global company do? They take any of their investments that they have planned for that country that can't get the cheap steel, and they send all that work. They send all that manufacturing to a country that can get the cheap steel. Because in Greenville, Michigan, on the west side, right over by us, Electrolux used to have a 2 million square foot facility. They shut it down and moved to Mexico. So you know what Electrolux could do with that $250 million investment they plan on doing in Tennessee? They could send it to Mexico, and they could build all that stuff in Mexico, because Mexico can get that cheap steel from China, from wherever it's doing it. So this is what happens on a global market. This isn't a simple, well, you have to build it here because we're really important. You know, those types of things, that'd be money moving out of this country. And so what he's assuming is that we could go back to, you know, the days when American steel was, you know, one of the biggest producers in the world. But he's also thinking of 1950-ish, when the United States owned approximately 80% of the world's economy, because they were still rebuilding after World War II. Like, can't bring that back. We are in a globalized world. I don't think there's any way you can isolation your way out of that. This is a decision that's going to have all kinds of effects. And like you said, there's no way they looked at all of them, which is a couple of dudes, and people keep quitting their jobs over there.
So and look at it this way too. All right, so if let's follow the however you say that name, that company's name,
Electrolux.
Yes, if you follow that strain, right? So they'll move their production facility to Mexico, let's say, and they can import their cheap steel,
or take that $250 million investment there.
Yeah. So
I think they have something in Tennessee, and they were going to invest more in it, and so they could just take that money down to Mexico.
So what's going to happen next in Trump's world? I mean, is he going to then? I mean, and this is kind of what some of that fear was. You know, they want to build the wall. They're going to create a war with Mexico. You know, economy wise, because you build a wall, you're going to piss a bunch of people off. What's going to happen here? You're going to create all these tariffs. They're going to import all that stuff. Is Trump then going to say, well, fine, you don't want to import into the U.S. You're not paying us our money that we wanted, you know, to make off your steel, so you can't flood our market. Oh, by the way, now we're going to put tariffs on imported products. We're going to make higher taxes if it's made majority in Mexico now. Oh, by the way, now, you know, that refrigerator that we used to be able to pay $300 for because it was a cheap piece of crap, now it's a $500 one, and they're not going to be able to compete. He's going to inflate costs. Now, I'm not saying that is going to happen, but that's a possibility. There's a huge possibility that we can go from, you know, these tariffs on just raw products to finished good products. And what happens then? Who's going to suffer? It's going to be us as consumers. It's not going to be the rest of the world. And I'm not saying that it's an unfair market. I'm not going to tell you that I don't think there's unfair markets out there. I'm just going to say is that I think there's got to be a smarter way to go about this, and a more intellectual way that we could create a different stability if that's what we're looking to gain out of this.
Well, there's two things there. One is when you talk about who's going to pay for this. As far as I know, there's something like 100 or a couple 100,000 steel workers, aluminum workers that are just actually manufacturing the materials in the United States. And there's something like 20 million steel manufacturer product users. So like me, I'm not a steel manufacturer, but I use steel. I cut, chop, slice, dice, grind steel all day long, every day. That's my job. You move and you package and move around steel framed and sheet metal framed furniture and products and stuff like that. So we are both out there on, you know, the farther tail end of the steel market. We will be affected by the price changes and things that will happen. So let's say a bunch of people at the steel manufacturing in the United States get a little bit of a price boost, a pay raise. And this is also assuming that their jobs are increased and all that profit doesn't just go directly to the people who own the companies. That's something else we could talk about. But what will happen is they get a boost there, but there's a lessening of supply throughout the country, and that increases cost and reduces the money for investment in other markets in areas like mine, small businesses, and in areas like yours where, let's say there's less product moving around because of whatever. I mean, all those different ripples can make a really big difference. So what's the smart thing we do? I said it earlier. It's the WTO. The entire world needs to get together and stop people like China that are flooding the markets. So China was growing at something like 16% every year, and they've since gone down to somewhere around 8%. But they still make the same amount of steel, and they can't use it all. So they have all this extra steel, and they need to maintain their production quotas, and they need to maintain that flow so they can keep that cash flow coming in. So they're selling that steel abroad now, and it's increasing the amount of steel in the world. Therefore, it's lowering the price. So what the world has got to say is, listen, man, you got to stop this. We did this to OPEC and said, you guys got to stop pumping. You got to stop throwing market oil all over. And they refused to, and we had the oil barrels drop down to $25 a barrel. Like, this is something that, we need to be able to punish China for as a world, as a collective. We attacked Iraq unilaterally just because we wanted to, and England kind of rode on our back. But nothing good came of that. These same kinds of things, the United States acting alone as if it is the king on the hill, even in the economic world, it's going to have the same kind of effects. It's going to be negative in the end. And that's what most people who way smarter than I am in economics are saying.
Yeah. And as we wrap the segment up, one of the last things I thought was very interesting is they talk about America's trading partners, right? The biggest lenders. And I think we missed over this point a little bit earlier. But they talk about our national debt continues to grow, right? Who buys a lot of our debt? And how does that affect the world, right? The more debt we sell, not that we should have debt, but the more debt we sell, the lower we could keep our interest rates, how we can keep them steady. Well, guess who is one of the largest buyers of our debt? China. So what do you think is going to happen? If we put these tariffs on, we stop importing all this stuff, they kind of get a little pissed off. They're like, well, why should we buy your debt? Again, that screws us.
How about the other way around? How about call in our debt? Hey, man, we need that money, bro. We're going to break your kneecaps if you don't pay up.
There you go. That too. So there's just...
Yeah, there's a big worry about that.
There is. And so we don't want to scare everybody. The goal of this was not to scare everybody. The goal is to educate you because, again, what are the one things that our podcast is going to stress for the next 8 months, 9 months? I don't know what month it is anymore. But go out and vote. Let's remove the conservative powers to be from the local and state offices. I can't stress that enough. We're going to take another quick commercial.
Get your senators, too. Go after them.
Yes, go after your senators. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to have the Michigan Atheist interview with Steve about the upcoming convention. We'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics.
Hey, this is Keith.
And this is Jen, and we're from Not Another Atheist Podcast.
You're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Join the revolution.
Looking for something new and exciting, or maybe just a change from the old atheist show format? Cellar Door Skeptics podcast provides listeners with hours of enjoyment each week on Spreaker and iTunes. Check us out as we talk politics, religion, science, reviews of books and music, along with the occasional interview just for a twist. Join Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern as they bring fresh content to you. Walk with us through the cellar door as we help you prepare for the revolution. You can find us on Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, and even on Facebook.
Hey, what's up? I'm Steve Hayes.
And I'm Dave Curry.
And we're from Prophetcast.
And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics
on the Fox News Network.
They're not affiliated with Fox.
Everyone's a Fox affiliate.
Now, back to the show.
As we begin Cellar Door Skeptics tonight, I have a special guest with me to talk about the up-and-coming Michigan Atheist Convention. we wanted to have them on to have a conversation real quick about the upcoming event, talk a little bit about the history of Michigan Atheists, and invite you to come to the best event that you will ever have in Michigan this year. Please welcome to the program, Steve Whitty.
Great to be on the show.
Hey, thank you for joining me tonight. So we wanted to have you on to talk about the Michigan Atheist Convention, which is coming up here April 7th. I believe that's a Saturday, and you guys are holding it at the Birmingham Temple for Secular Humanism in Farmington Hills.
Yeah, the Center for Secular Humanism is an organization, and the Birmingham Temple is in fact a non-theistic Judaism, Jewish temple. It's a really weird thing. And then it's the Birmingham Temple, but it's not located in Birmingham. Apparently that's historic. It's located in Farmington Hills. So, 28611 West 12 Mile Road in Farmington Hills. So it's an interesting location. The venue, is large. You can actually have 300 people in one room, with the with the sound system, with the all of the stuff. Everything is all there. So on the 7th, the registration starts at 9 a.m. Speakers start at 10 a.m. We should be all done at 5 p.m. And then there's a break between that and 8 p.m. We have an afterglow, which is optional. So we have some speakers lined up, including Cellar Door Skeptics.
And no, that's not why we had you on the show, but it is a benefit to be blessed to be at the event this year.
We're glad to have you in any case. So we've got a theme this year, and it's the secular family experiencing awe and wonder. Now, we stole experiencing awe and wonder from Oprah, who said that atheists do not experience awe and wonder. But that really is what we're talking about, is the secular family and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and some of the people you have lined up, I mean, for example, your keynote speaker is Dale McGowan. If anybody listening to the show has ever heard of Dale McGowan, he has several parenting books. He's obviously a renowned author. He's a college professor. I believe he's spoken in Michigan at least once, if not twice, in the last 10 years. So,
And then from the Freedom from Religion Foundation, Rebecca Markert. She's the legal director, and she'll be talking about some of the legal things that the FFRF have been doing. I'm sure she will. Anyway, I'm pretty sure. Kimberly Veal, president of People of Color Beyond Faith, and host of Freethinkers Radio Network. She does a lot of things in the Chicago area. And then Jim Helton, who's the national field organizer from American Atheist, and his daughter Kelly Helton, who is a teenage activist and in her own right. And then of course, Cellar Door Skeptics. That's you guys, right?
Yeah, that's us.
Chris Tanner.
It is us.
So,
yes.
Yeah. So that's the convention.
Yeah. So what's exciting about the convention, that you don't see a lot, and that's kind of one of the things that we kind of complained about, or I did specifically when I came out as an atheist about 5 years ago, was where's the secular community that helped embrace families? That was on the west side of Michigan. There is some of that. I've made a lot of connections with different families around here who are secular in their beliefs, and, our kids can play with other kids because of that. But that was one of the big things, when you leave the church and all those things, what happens? Where does your community go? how do we navigate that life? And then what do you do? For example, you guys are going to talk about On Wonder. Well, that's kind of the same thing for us. The way we see things is that life doesn't just stop. It doesn't continue to just be like, oh, it's all just little hard facts or, cold logic. We still have feelings. We still have love. We still have joy. We still have family to think about. And the nice thing is you guys are doing it's a very humanistic look at, hey, how is secular family affecting, people that don't go to church anymore?
Sure. So on the east side of the lower Michigan state, the Detroit area, we'll call it that. Michigan Atheist has been here for quite a while. It was founded in 1975. When Arlene, over the past 10, 15 years, Arlene was head of Michigan Atheist, and she encouraged people to form their own groups. So there are, in fact, quite a few groups in the Southeast Michigan area for atheism, and they have different names. They don't all say Michigan Atheists or even have atheists in the name. But my favorite name, I think, is DAM, the Detroit Atheist Meetup. They meet once a month at Logan's, which is a restaurant and bar, and they have a good time. So what we do as a group. So Arlene died a couple years ago, and so what we have historically done, and what we do is Michigan Atheists has as a primary mission the separation of church and state. You might think of that as a religious sort of theme, but I think of it as a political theme, right? Separation of church and state is in the Constitution, and we do things, basically education and so on, to support separation of church and state.
Mm-hmm.
And Arlene had teamed up with Americans United for separation of church and state, an organization which has historically been headed by, like most recently that I remember, a Baptist minister. And so separation of church and state isn't simply an atheist thing. It's the original idea was to protect religion from the government.
Yes.
So the government should not support one religion over others, because that would be bad for most people, and so on. So it just happens to be, I think, in the best interest of atheists as well. Atheists and other non-believers of whatever they call themselves.
Exactly. And I would agree with you. Keeping religion out of the government is the best bet. I mean, we see it over here on the west side of Michigan all the time. I mean, my kid had a Christmas, choir concert where every song's religious. You go to talk to them and they're like, well, technically speaking, because they're over this certain date, they're part of what we would consider like a choir type song, therefore it's legal. And when I was in Jenison, they actually led people to sing these old hymns directly during the service. And I get that's comforting probably for some people. And I wouldn't lie and say that, that old music doesn't bring back memories of me. But, at the same time, it's like, I don't believe in any of this. Why am I being subjected to something that I don't believe in, that I don't feel you have a right to tell me about?
For former Christians, it often isn't that bad. But for lifelong atheists, there can be real resentment there. And, it can be irritating in any case. The idea of having the state doing, supporting, and we've had this past year, we've had all kinds of incidents where, government money went to a Lutheran to support a Lutheran playground at their church. I mean, seriously? in some sense, we're, the atheists are also supporting this sort of, money comes out of taxes, right? So we're supporting this sort of thing. That's less than optimal. I mean, there's going to be things that, do I really want money spent for this or that the government is doing? There's going to be that for everybody. Everybody's going to say something that they don't like. But by and large, the money that goes into taxes should go back into supporting the country in a variety of ways.
Yep.
So,
I would agree. And,
anyway.
and that's kind of one of the nice things that American Atheists has always stood up for. And you all are the Michigan version of American Atheists, correct?
We're an affiliate.
There you go.
So being an affiliate with American Atheists doesn't really mean that much, but we are an affiliate. So
yeah, and that's always something American Atheists has kind of pushed for too. They've kind of been the firebrand. I found when I came over to the East Side a couple of years ago, there's some firebrands over there, but there's a lot of love, there's a lot of attention, and it feels like one big family.
Sure, absolutely. That's kind of what we would expect. Atheists are human too, something like that. Anyway,
we hope at least, right?
yeah. So just moving on in the history. Just 2-3 years ago, Arlene died. She had been the director of Michigan Atheist. We looked around for how to continue, and for a while, her partner George, attempted to run the organization. But George, we just had a birthday party for George. He turned 90. And a couple of years ago, he did it for like a few months, and he said, I really can't do this anymore. So we don't have a particularly formal set, bylaws, that sort of stuff at the moment. I think we're heading in that direction, but we don't yet have that yet. And we basically informally put together a board, and eventually we got Joyce Whitty, my wife, to be a co-director with Marty Mayer, and so the mostly it is Joyce, but so we missed for a variety of reasons. We missed doing a convention 1 year. And then instead of doing the convention in December, which is where Arlene traditionally had it, we moved it to the spring, really toward Easter. And so this year is April 7th on the Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of the reason why we missed a year is that there was another convention that seemed to align with when we wanted to do our convention, and it looked like it was going to be a very big deal, and it eventually fell through, but it did sort of mess up our timing.
Yeah.
So.
But you're back now, and you were back last year, and you're back this year, and that's exciting.
That's right.
So.
Yeah. So I personally had been to Arlene's last convention, and I thought it was well put together and so on. We've made a ton of changes. Instead of having it at a hotel, we have it at the Birmingham Temple. I think the Birmingham Temple is a better venue, personally, but we also went there because it's a little cheaper. But in Arlene's last convention, we had great speakers and so on, so I have a feeling for, what that was about, how that was run. but actually putting on the convention yourself, you have to, go out and get speakers, come up with a theme if you can manage it, right? Because you ask potential speakers, what they think, and they either like it or they turn you down, and then do you have enough people to talk on your topic? So, but also we wanted a variety of speakers, not just a bunch of white males. Although we certainly have some. We wanted to have some diversity in the speakers. So we think that we've gotten that this year. So it's not just males and they're not just white. So we did that to some extent, I think. Last year, we didn't achieve what we wanted exactly, but it was the best we could do at the time. Anyway, we had a great convention last year. I think there were more people there than at Arlene's last convention. And I'm hoping that this year, the venue last year, they'd had a leak in the roof, so half the building was closed. That's been fixed, so we had more people, and we could double the amount of people that we had last year and still be fine. So the venue, I think, is awesome.
Yeah. And I've been to that, the Birmingham Temple once before for one of the other events you hosted. I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago. Because you all have been using that place for quite a while now. I see, maybe it was a Sunday assembly I went out there for. But I was out there about 2 or 3 years ago for some event, either through Michigan Atheists or the Sunday assembly out there. And I got to check out the temple at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think the hardest thing about the temple is actually finding it as you're driving up the road. Yeah. It's across the street from a cemetery. That's my my sign. There's it's a historic cemetery, so there's some historic sign with some a paragraph or something on it. Anyway, it happens to be essentially across from the driveway into the temple.
Yep. Well, again, Steve, thank you very much for joining us tonight. For everybody listening, we've had the links in the description for the last month and a half now. We will put them at the top again and ensure that if you want to come out and hear any of the amazing speakers, if you want to come out and have a good time, if you want to go out and just mingle with other local Michigan community, secular-minded people, this is the place to go. April 7th. Again, all the information will be on the website that you can check out, and we hope to see everybody there.
Yeah, it should be great.
So, thank you again, Steve, for joining us, and I will see you all in, 3 weeks now? I think 3 weeks, maybe 4? Not long.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you again, Steve, and have a good night.
Thanks for having the show.
Hello, I'm Miss B. Haven.
I'm Demanda Wright.
And we're
promoting secular feminism. And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Considering how you want to help Cellar Door Skeptics, head over to iTunes or your favorite podcast app and give us a rating, because every rating helps push us in front of new listeners. And since our main goal here at Cellar Door Skeptics is to provide the most accurate information possible, we hope that more ratings will mean that more people get to hear the topics that we're presenting. We don't insist that we get a 5-star rating, but Hannah's favorite number is 5, and the more gold stars he gets, the more special he's gonna feel. So what do you say? Head on over to iTunes or Google Play, give us a rating, and help engage with Cellar Door Skeptics today.
This is Trav Mamone, host of the By Any Means podcast, and you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics. Prepare for the revolution. We have cookies.
Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all for sticking around through an amazing episode. We did a little bit of comedy to begin with, or tried to, as much as people that quit and get fired are funny. I mean, it is, it's Trump, so it's funny. We talked about the tariffs.
It is funny.
It is, you can't help it. We talked about tariffs. We did an interview for an upcoming amazing convention, which, by the way, you should make sure you all go out and get your tickets and come meet up and hang out with your two favoritist podcasters of all times. And you don't get to hang out with Hannah very, very often because Hannah is super, super busy, and soon he'll have a second kid and he'll be so busy he'll never do anything again but cry into his pillow every night. So you should come to the Michigan Atheist Convention and hang out with us for Hannah's last free day till D-Day. And then
till 18 years from May.
No, it gets better once they get a little bit older and a little bit more self-sufficient. When they're younger, it's a lot harder to get out and do things. But once they get a little bit older, it's a lot easier. But for the last segment, we thought
once I can ship them off to hang out.
There you go. Yeah, see? For the last segment, we thought we would talk a little bit about being skeptics in the science community, right? It's easy to be skeptics against woo-woo science, right? I mean, we can debunk vaccine controversy issues, GMO controversy issues, right? BS cancer treatment issues. We can do all of that. But when you have an individual as well known as the person we're going to talk about in a minute, and they make a claim and say they've done this research on it, it kind of makes you start to question a little bit about whether the standard truly held science that we have right now is factual, or if this guy maybe has just spent way too many years in his career and probably should have just retired.
Yeah. Well, I mean, really, when it comes down to it, it's we're talking about the scientific method. We're talking about peer review. That's really the question. And so this guy is someone who is inside the system. He's known for writing papers for basic psychology. And I mean, there's no reason to really question his expertise, but he's someone who is very contemptuous for the evaluation of pharmaceutical companies, and he apparently he has a real strong bias against using what it would be pharmaceuticals and classifying things that would obviously make a lot of money. And so there are some things in here that we need to consider as far as a bias and stuff. But this guy has made a decision. He's made a ruling, and he's one of the top people in the field. And so it's one person against an entire field of people who still say that ADD, ADHD are real, and they're not a special thing that's been kind of created by the pharmaceutical industry to make money. That's basically what the rest of the world has to say to this. Is this guy, did he find some new thing, and should we all adjust our science accordingly, or is he an outlier who's basically making a stated opinion, which is he's using in his expertise field as an expert to change the conversation. That's kind of what I think here is whether or not the scientific peer review will tell this guy he's wrong.
Yep. And the funny thing here is, and this was actually my first clue that, hey, hold on a second, maybe we shouldn't be just accepting this at face value, is the name of the website that everybody's sharing around right now is called Curious Mind Magazine. And I hear that and I go, sounds woo-ish to me just off the bat. Even before reading what the title is, it's definitely not.
Sounds like a blog.
It's definitely not this mainstream, well-researched out scientific outlet that I'm used to going to. It's just not. And a lot of people will go, well, our political, websites are kind of, some of them are not on the up and up. And yeah, we could talk about that, but we're talking in the science realm. Yeah, there's some startup blogs that we should be, listening to. But this one is not one I've ever heard of. It's not anything that's ever shown up on the radar. So that's my first clue. And then literally in the opening sentence, they say, in this interview, one Harvard University's dominant psychologist of the 21st century, Jerome Kagan, of Harvard University, has courage and professional expertise to compare psychology to a rotten piece of furniture. right there, just how they open it up.
Yeah.
Now we're now talking about how did Trump win the election, right? What did he use? Tactics he used? What type of language are we using? This is not something that you would normally find in a scientific article. This is not. This is something you're going to see in headline grabby. How do I get more views and shares on my website to ensure that I make more money off ads? That's what this feels like.
That's definitely something that's a bit of an issue. And so this is crazy how this kind of sort of worked into something that I listened to today. I was listening to Planet Money, and there was an experiment. So basically, we've included the link so you can listen to it because it's really great. And I've been trying to find the full transcript of it. But essentially what happened was there was a paper that came out a few years ago. So I'm thinking like 2014 or something. And it was a paper that found that there were people who could predict the future. They used the scientific method, and they had these, all these steps that were all, double blind and everything. Everything was there. The scientific method itself was legit. And they found that ESP, prediction of the future, was a real possibility, according to this paper. And it's a huge deal. People were like, what? And so there was a bunch of people that said this is something that's changing kind of the world or whatever. And then, there's a guy named Brian Nosek, and he's a psychologist at the University of Virginia. And they said there's really two options: either ESP is true, or if we change our beliefs about the right way to do science. Or the other option is that we have to change our methods of science. We have to change the way we understand and do something with science. So the whole idea here, in the end, is it's not going to be ESP is true. Something we've talked about is you can be skeptical all you want, but we have tested, not me and you, but humanity has tested for ESP, and every time that they've done real blind studies, it's never been picked up. It's never been proved. James Randi had $1 million prize for anyone that could prove it for years and years and years. He shut it down because nobody could really do anything anymore. So the question is, what's wrong here? And so this guy, Nosek, he said that essentially he was trying to figure out what was wrong with that study. It was beautifully written. It was beautifully experimented. Everything was exactly the way it should have been. And so what he started doing was he started talking about experiment repeatability. And he looked into a whole bunch of studies that whether or not they could be repeated. And he did a whole bunch of them, and he couldn't get the same results. And so he and a bunch of other people all got together and said, we're going to do 100 experiments that were published, and we're going to try to recreate what they did. And the reason for that is we always talk about, when you hear about they talk about whether or not you can believe in God and what's the evidence that you would need. Repeatable experimentation, something that you could test, verify, and test again and verify again, and it's consistent and always comes true. That's the basis behind science. And so these really amazing studies that had this really impressive finding, he said, well, let's test a bunch of these. And they tested 100 of these experiments, and only 39 of them were confirmed. They could not recreate the experiments accurately with the same results that were originally gotten in 61 of those experiments. And so that's a failure of 61% out of 100, which is horrible. It's really bad. And so that's kind of the whole thing, is that this guy for Harvard, he may be one of those studies that got a positive. And so they were like, wow, we should really publish this because it's a huge finding. So this guy may be he's the one guy who's getting a bunch of press over this, but he may be an outlier, a non-consistent, and something that science would eventually just say, well, this is not a positive finding. This isn't following the laws of the basic scientific method, and therefore we can eliminate the findings of either this person or this experiment.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think that got into the scientific experiment papers, right? You just think about that and you're like, holy crap. All of this got in there, how did that happen?
Yeah. They talk about it in the Planet Money episode. It's basically that how often do you see something published or hear about something being published in a major journal? And it's like, we did this experiment and we didn't find anything. We had this plan and we thought we were going to find, the new version of the Higgs boson or whatever, but we didn't find it. So here's what we did. please publish this. And the paper's going to be like, that's not going to sell us magazines. Why would we publish that? So what they're thinking is that a lot of really good but negative experiments just get put into a shelf, into a filing cabinet, and then never make it anywhere. The only ones that get published are the ones that are like, wow, this is an unexpected result, or we found exactly what we wanted. But what's happening is there's kind of a bias here. There's a confirmation bias. You're looking for something, you find it, this is a big deal, woohoo, or you're looking for something and it's something that you don't expect, but it's still somewhat a positive. It's a discovery and something that people will put in their papers. And so what they're saying is that all of those negative experiments never get looked at, and those negative experiments would invalidate the one that got that kooky answer. But that was big enough to get published. And that's what they're saying, is that these experiments are not repeatable, but they get the hoopla of actually getting published because they're interesting, because we find it unique, whatever reasons, because scientists are humans and we're fallible creatures. And that's kind of the idea, is what they're thinking as to why the number of failures was so high.
Yeah. And that's just crazy because, you think of ESP, I think of X-Files. And ironically, the wife and I have been watching older X-Files episodes just because I haven't seen them all. So it's kind of fun to go back through, and she gets to watch my reactions. And like finally we're into the one season where you actually see a bunch of aliens like over and over again. And you're like, holy crap, like yeah, you didn't know this was this about. I was like, I did, but this kind of just like weirdly ballsy, them showing you dead aliens, and you're just like, holy crap, like they're just outing themselves for, hey, we're airing our dirty laundry in the air. And that's kind of like with this, ESP is a pretty... it's something that I have friends that believe in. They believe in this, and they believe in ghosts and all these other things. And for them, this is something they can utilize to argue with me on. And I'm going to say is, why would I want that? And if you kind of go back to take this and go back to the article I had, somebody's using that and saying, hey, look at this scientific figure, and he's out against ADD or ADHD, and he thinks it's BS. And you're sitting there going, hold on, that's not what the science says. You know what the science says about this, right? Well, no. Yeah, well, this guy's like really famous in that, and therefore this is what it is. And, people are over-diagnosing it. Well, hold on a second. Okay, so fine. Maybe that's a fact. Maybe that does happen.
I could give it that. I could say
that.
I would think that that's... You don't think I would say that if something is possible, that would be the most possible of all of this, is that some people get diagnosed with that. Would be the only place that I could see. Yeah.
Yep.
But saying it's a fraud is incredibly improbable.
Yeah. And then it doesn't, and that we should be monitoring this with diets and just letting kids be kids type things. And I'm saying is, hold on, I actually have a child that is definitely ADD and probably ADHD. He has been diagnosed. I have actual scientific things behind what we did for him. Like, we tested, they do these tests, right? And one of the tests that they do is they do like an IQ type test, right? And they give it to you based on before you have medicine and then after you have medicine, and then they actually equate out the average, and they say, well, if you were a normal brain, like one that functions normally, this is where your IQ would be, and they give you like the scale. And he ranged the far left of the scale because of his disability, with the ADD. If you were to put him on medicine, this is where they feel he'll range into. Well, guess what? You put him on the medicine. Now, we caught it early, but you put it on the medicine, you're right. I mean, is my son a straight A 4.0 student? No. Could he probably be close to that if he tried? Yeah, he really could. But, his ADD gets into other things. There's a lot more complications to that, where he's just not as interested in certain types. I mean, he's excelled at it. He's in a play. He's excelled at it. I mean, he's being looked at for a paid internship as a sophomore in high school already within the first play that he participates in, right? So he has the capability. He could get better grades if he really wants to. But when you actually look at the scientific study and it demonstrates where that brain goes, right, just right there, and I know that's personal evidence, but just right there with that scientific method, it demonstrates that there is some cause and effect to ADHD and how it affects an individual's brain. And so I found another article from sciencebasedmedicine.org, and they talk about this ADD controversy, right? And again, I don't want to get into the extreme details of, well, yes, it is true, no, it isn't true. I'm more thinking we need to stay on the outlying sides of this and just say, how do we handle this. But what they did in this article, and I think this was very good, is they took the ADD nature, they took the diagnoses, they took different signs, different other disorders that come along with it, and they laid all these different things out. And then what they decided to do is they decided to say, okay, hey, how does this affect the brain? And let's compare it to other neurological things that we can actually analyze, such as, different type of traumatic disorders, due to accident type industries, or not industries, but accidents that happen, such as like car accidents, right? And how does that type of a trauma affect the brain? And one of the big criticisms that they had is they go, what, this guy's giving you articles, but not peer-reviewed studies. Now, in your case, in what you were listening to, those were peer-reviewed. They made it into a peer-reviewed scientific journal. Yeah. That's a little scary. That's a little scarier than this situation. This guy doesn't have... Yeah, this guy doesn't have the peer-reviewed aspects. But it kind of goes back to, Hannah, you and I have had debates with Christians, even on the show, about evolution, right? We've talked about evolution in the sense, and people go, well, yeah, you've got all these peer-reviewed studies, but guess what? We still don't believe it's true. We still think it's there's a conspiracy against this, blah, 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 blah. And we've argued aggressively. Then something like this comes out, and you and I have to eat a little bit of crow and say, okay, let's hold on a second, what failed? And in your case, that Money article and that pocket, that guy that went out and did it, they went out and tried to replicate the experiments. That's great. That's amazing. That's something, that's a scientific method saying, okay, hold on, we checks and balances here. We don't think it works, but hey, we're going to go ahead and retest it, because if it does work a second time through all these different experiments, we should be concerned where we're at and expand our scientific model. We should immediately do that.
Yeah, that is the most important thing. One of the reasons why a lot of these experiments don't get confirmed, don't get re-evaluated, don't get rated, is because it costs money. It costs tons and tons of money to even do an experiment the first time. And we don't invest in science and infrastructure like we used to in this country. One, because like we said earlier in the episode, we don't have 80% of the world's market as part of our economy anymore. I mean, everything's been stretched out further and further. And these experiments could be recreated all over the world. Maybe I don't know what the future for science in a global world is, but it's just something that this needs to happen more. There need to be more checks and balances in the peer review system. As we talked about the guy who won the Nobel Prize in Physics a few years ago, he, as part of his acceptance speech, he said that he's going to boycott all the major journals because of a pay-to-play system. Like, there's all kinds of human problems that still exist in the scientific method, and we have to find them. This is a case where we found them. Some real scientists are working at it. Hopefully, for this guy from Harvard who's saying that he's going against the grain for what peer-reviewed science says, hopefully he'll put out some papers. He will, subject himself to peer review, and hopefully he'll be published somewhere. And hopefully, if it's a negative finding on what he's saying, then he's wrong. Then the scientific community will do that to him.
Exactly.
Right. We'll change what we think. I mean, that's kind of the most important thing. Regardless of being right or what we thought, is whether or not we are finding the most truth.
Exactly. And if we go back to the ADHD article, right, they talk about what's the nuanced discussion here, and they say, maybe if we were generous to him, we're not going to say he's simply wrong. We're going to say he's just saying they're overdiagnosed, like we talked about, right? That's the safe avenue, that maybe people are being overdiagnosed, because of the gray zone, because of the funding they want. In my case, in my personal experience, it's not the funding. I had to fight the school. I had to pay for money out of pocket to get my kid diagnosed. The school didn't want him to be diagnosed in any way, shape, or form. They were very anti us doing that. Even though he showed symptoms and had hereditary on both sides of the family. It wasn't just one side. We're talking both sides of the family are highly diagnosed. I mean, and it's funny, I live with my wife every day, right? I mean, if she doesn't take her medicine for 3 days, there's a difference. You can tell. And it's not a mental thing where she knows I could give her a placebo and she still won't be able to function. There is a difference there. And so again, like you were kind of saying, hey, maybe people are being a little bit too loose with the medicine, the diagnosis, and that's fine. one of the arguments Keegan had made was that the technology to diagnose and the criteria is outdated. Okay, maybe you're right, my
let's make
friend.
some new stuff.
I don't disagree with you because, people still think trans gender individuals is a disease. That diagnosis is part of a disease. It's not. It's not actually a disease. It's our technology and our ability to understand gender and gender fluidity has finally developed farther than what has been documented or changed. Which is why I had a huge issue with a lot of people saying, hey, we want gun control. Well, we need mental health. Well, no.
Yeah.
If you want to have the mental health thing, then we need a more rigorous mental health system that actually changes and updates information in our books more than once every 10 fucking years,
Yeah. Invest in it. I mean, that's what it all comes down to. So we need to invest millions and millions of dollars into this guy's ADHD thoughts, and he can either prove himself right or prove himself wrong, and the rest of the scientific community can say yeah or no. But we don't take that money and put that in there. We build bombs here. We build bombs and we say, no, you can't bring your steel into our country. That's what America does now. That's what it feels like.
So as we wrap up, we aren't saying the scientific method doesn't work. We actually say it does work. We find
and it's working right now.
It is, exactly. We find that a lot of people take a very sharp, critical approach to science. And in fairness, we both believe science works. But there's
one
always
data
room
point
at a time.
Yeah, one data point does not a theory make.
Exactly. And there's always room for improvement. The difference is that those of us who understand how much effort, how much money, how much time and effort goes into creating a scientific theory and actually testing this and making sure all this is pliable and durable, people who are against science, who have an axe to grind or a position to push, are going to essentially say the same evidence that we're using argues for their position, that we're fatally flawed, that we are not able to criticize ourselves or think skeptically about it. The difference is we're saying we're not willing to rush into something when a general consensus happens, and we would like to go through the whole method before we just make an arbitrary claim such as ADHD is fraudulent, ADHD doesn't exist, ADHD is nothing but an exaggerated claim that people are using to medicate children to control them. We need to stop that, and we need to say, hey, no matter who you are, what you do, how you get paid for, if what you're proposing violates not only the scientific method, but a general concessions,
Consensus, baby.
Thank you.
Oh, there you go.
We need to stop and actually look at the whole of the picture before we just take somebody's word on it.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us for another Cellar Door Skeptics. We'll be back next week with another amazing episode right here, Tuesday. Have a good night, everyone.
You've been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker, cellardoorskeptics.com.